Welcome back, and moving on to our first segment for today. To shed the light on President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's two-day visit to France and his participation in the International Summit for a New Global Financial Pact. Talking more about this important event and the importance of the participation of President el-Sisi in this important event over the phone, we have Ambassador Gamal Bayoumy, a former Assistant Foreign Minister. Hello?
Hello, yes, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. So first of all, I'd like to shed the light on the significance of this important visit or participation in this summit.
It is another step in many steps we took towards all our partners all over the world. Here now it is a very important partner, whether it is the European Union or France, our main trade partner in Europe, and it has a big history, an old history of relationship between Egypt and France in many fields. And the new issue here is finance, because really we are claiming that Africa, although it is not that rich, Africa is sending money to Europe much more than it receives, because it pays its debts, it pays the imports cost much more than it receives of investment or as a result of its exports. So we started this initiative in Sharm el-Sheikh, asking our main financial partners in order to finance new projects in Africa with the Egyptian experience, because we say and we think that we are the most accepted face all over Africa by all means. And our initiative is accepted and welcomed from Europe, from China, from Japan. Now we are making a sort of practical effort in order to find more and more finance and more chances in order to attract more investment for Egypt and for Africa also.
Mr. Ambassador, many points were discussed, or we are talking also about climate change, we are talking about renewable energy, talking about different things that were discussed. So I'd like to just hear from you more about the priorities or the top important points that are discussed and the impacts of this on the world economy in general.
It is a chain of efforts. We want to make our market much more attractive to the investor, whether by making our environment much better. And here Africa is suffering from being used by the industrial world, where they are doing bad to the world environment, whether Europe, America, or China, while we do not make anything bad against the weather or the environment. On the contrary, the African forest is producing more oxygen for the world environment. And here we are. But environment is just one side of the story. We need also much more finance, much more developing our telecommunication and road and ports and airway traffic. Also our banking system needs to be ameliorated. All these efforts are the multi-phases of our efforts in order to make our environment more attractive for more and more investments.
Mr. Ambassador, how far can this important summit help, first of all, in attracting more foreign investments and also talking about the financing of small and medium enterprises?
We are fighting on many fronts. on one side that we are asking the donor countries and the rich countries in order to come and to make our life easier in the source of finance. On the other way, we have to do our homework also. We need to make our market more attractive by making a much better banking system. Bureaucracy is our enemy. To make more roads and more transport means at the international environment, at the international level, our bureaucracy needs to be ameliorated because always the investor is complaining about the bureaucracy in Africa. So it is multi-efforts on two fronts. The front of the foreign investors to make him happier to come to our country. On the other side, we have to do many things in order to deserve much more investment in our countries, whether in Egypt or the African continent.
Well, President Sisi was keen also to have several meetings with the CEOs of leading companies over there in France. And of course, as you mentioned, this is very, very important. So usually we are used to the fact that usually the president meets top officials and leaders in addition to CEOs of multinational and international actually enterprises, then paving the way for more investments to come. So tell us more about this point and what do we expect in the future?
The new element here that we are using the most important weapon of our diplomacy, which is the presidential level. We have ambassadors and ministers who are doing their job. But we were lacking the presidential level to help us. And here we have very active president. He went to the far east in Japan, to the far west in France and Paris, to the north in New York, to the south in every single African country. And he is giving his way also by using his presidential level to meet by himself all the investors, the heads of the important companies in many fields. And here we see the results immediately because the presidential level is the most effective one. It can immediately conclude agreements. It can immediately make the government implement whatever we agreed upon on the presidential level. So it is a new weapon. It is a new phase of the Egyptian diplomacy, and we are glad to see how active it is doing its job. And the results are really, we are proud of what our president is doing.
How do you see the French investments so far in Egypt?
Europe is our main trade and investment partner. And on top of Europe, it comes France, and it is the largest investor between the European countries. But of course, we are much more ambitious to double these efforts in order, because there is a space to make more investments in Egypt, to make more trade, to make more exports and more imports. And this is what we are doing. Also in the field of education, we are adding to the Francophonie process. Boutros Ghali was the first Secretary General of the Francophonie, so we do not forget education also, that after all we are a country among the Francophonie countries. So it is many ways to strengthen the relations, and we are doing our best in all those dimensions.
Talking also about the relations between France and Egypt, when it comes to the health sector?
I tell you one piece of information that most of the money we are getting from Europe in general and from France is a sort of grants. They give us money, they do not ask us to pay back. Many of the European projects are financed by grants. And this is the generosity of Europe in general and France on top of them.
Right. Talking about the situation of inequality when it comes to the International Monetary Fund to contribute to the provision of liquidity in the global economic system. So tell us more about this, especially that we are talking about some countries really they need more and that they need to be supported financially as well, more than some other countries.
Yes, and here I recall some European leaders said once that the international banks, in order to lend you, they want to make sure that you do not need the money, because those who are in need of the money, they cannot pay back. So, of course, there is a difference between the relation of the international banking system towards the third world, towards the developing countries, in comparison with the developed and the rich countries. Of course, there is a sort of a different approach here and there. But this should encourage us to make ourselves more useful, more able to pay back whatever we borrow from the banking system.
The whole world is facing, of course, many economic challenges. And nowadays, it is crystal clear that you can never differentiate between politics and economics. Both are moving in two parallel lines. So all these leaders meeting in France and officials, so the importance of this and its impact on many of the challenges we are facing right now.
Yes, it's well known that we all were suffering from two international challenges. First, the epidemic of Corona-19, the whole world was suffering. Thank God that Egypt was in a better situation and we could face this challenge successfully. The second challenge, which is still going on, is a war in Ukraine. And here the whole world is affected. Even the big economies are affected by this war, and it affects the finance, it affects the supply of energy and gas, it affects the supply of food and cereals. So we are trying to deal with all of these problems and challenges, and thank God that although we are facing the problem, but it is well known that Egypt is in a much better situation than many countries in the world, because we had the courage to start our economic reform since 2016, and the result of this is that we are, of course, we are facing many challenges and problems, but in a much better stand and situation. And if you compare Egypt with many countries in the world.
Well, talking about all the events that are taking place all around, and as we mentioned, we can never differentiate between politics and economics. So for sure, we have some of the political issues also were raised, like some talks about what is going on in Sudan, and still we have different points of view in this respect. So tell us more about these important files.
Yes, as we said, that we were facing and we're still facing the international problems, whether it is Ukraine or the corona epidemic. But we have plenty of regional problems. We have problems in Syria and Syria is divided in two phases fighting each other. Lebanon is not in good health. Lebanon without a president since some time. Sudan is very complicated problem, where even the army, which is supposed to have loyalty towards one flag, the army itself is fighting each other. The problem in Yemen, in Somalia, in Libya, and all these countries are around us, and of course they affect our economy, they affect our security. So we have to deal with all of this, and we are asking our main partners in the whole world to participate and to cooperate in order to face all these problems and solve it in a way or another.
Right. Of course, taking into consideration that we don't have economic stability without political stability.
Yes.
Ambassador Gamal Bayoumy, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for joining us. And moving on to a quick break, then we'll be back.